Today saw the beginning of the federal trial USA v. Gallagher in Nashville. This is the trial that was supposed to begin last week, but was delayed due to Winter Storm Heather. Jury selection started yesterday and was wrapped up today. We've seen a total of 12 jurors seated with 4 additionals in case a juror has to drop out for any reason. Once the jury was sworn in today, we got right into opening statements. The prosecution began, and they made the claims that they will be able to prove beyond a shadow of doubt that the defendants are guilty of all charges. I'm going to get a little bit technical, so bear with me here, but those charges are, 1, that all of the defendants did willfully combine, conspire, and agree with one another, and with other persons known and unknown to the grand jury, to injure, oppress, threaten, and intimidate patients and employees of the clinic in the free exercise and enjoyment of the rights and privileges secured to them by the laws of the United States, namely, to provide and seek to provide reproductive health services, as provided by Title 18 U.S. Code Section 248C, in violation of Title 18 U.S. Code Section 241. That's a very long way of saying they conspired to obstruct rights. That is the conspiracy charge that we've talked about previously. They also claim that all of the defendants did by force, threat of force, and physical obstruction intentionally injure, intimidate, and interfere with, and attempt to injure, intimidate, and interfere with patients and providers of reproductive health services. That is the charge pertaining to the violation of the FACE Act. The prosecution also claims that tactics such as interfacing with the police to prolong the protest and what they call blowfishing took place. Pre-trial was the first time I had heard this term, blowfishing, but apparently it means something along the lines of protesters wanting to appear larger in numbers than they actually are. I'm sure we'll learn what was done with their opening statements. The defense lawyers had their turn. Some of them were very quick to point out that the prosecution has to prove that the defendants had to do one of the following to be guilty: injure, oppress, threaten, or intimidate. If they did not do those things, then they are not guilty of the charges that the prosecution is claiming. It is also at this point that we hear from the lawyers of Coleman Boyd and Paul Vaughn, and we learn that the evidence appears to show, and they believe will conclusively show, that Coleman Boyd and Paul Vaughn never even participated in the blockade at all. After the opening statements, which took just a little over an hour, the prosecution called in their first witness. This witness was a police officer from Mount Juliet, Tennessee, who happened to be at the event when it happened on March 5th of 2021 in Mount Juliet. He repeated multiple times throughout his testimony that the protesters were nonviolent and did not pose a threat. It appeared that he was only able to identify one of the defendants when asked in court. That defendant was Gallagher. The rest of them, even when asked, he could not recall ever seeing before. To close out the day, there were a few questions about some of his previous interviews with the FBI, I presume, if not the FBI, another federal agency of some sort. But there were questions as to whether or not the attitude of a patient that was affected by the protest was affected by the protesters or by the presence of police officers that she saw when she exited the elevator. It was clear that she was agitated in some sort of way, but whether or not that was the protesters or the police officers or some combination of both, that was unclear. That about wraps up what happened in the court today. Jury selection didn't conclude until almost halfway through the activities to report on. Please follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. We'll continue to give these updates as the trial continues. And if you haven't listened to the episodes of the podcast we've released, we'll be releasing some more episodes very soon. Until we have more to report on, which will hopefully be tomorrow night, have a good night.